Election fraud claims have gotten traction all over the country, but still no real evidence of there being any. And that's the subject of Robert Gehrke's column today, written in kind of a different style.
Yeah, a very different way. He joins us this morning to talk about it. And Robert, you say we'd have all kinds of trouble if criminal investigations were handled like the investigations into election fraud claims.
Yeah. So it is a little bit of a different take for me this time. I was so frustrated with this action that the legislature took last week to authorize this audit. I was frustrated with some of the criticisms that Mike Schultz came out with, like he's just trying to get to the truth. And I sort of envisioned what it might be like if Mike Schultz, instead of being a state legislator, was a police detective investigating a murder, and came up with this sort of absurdist scenario where they just show up in the middle of the night, knock on the door, come through the house, knocking things over, looking for something. But there's no evidence that there's actually ever been an underlying crime committed. And that's, in my mind, that's really what we're doing now with this legislative audit of our election system. There's no evidence that anybody can point to. The state auditor, John Dougal, was asked many times to do an election audit and declined because he couldn't find any legitimate abnormalities that necessitated investigation. But they're plowing ahead with it anyway because they have these complaints that are completely unsubstantiated from people like Mike Lindell and Steve Christiansen and Phil Lyman. So, and now apparently Mike Schultz is part of that.
Yeah, so you're kind of comparing this to a murder and saying no murder here because no body, no weapon, no blood, nobody missing. So what do you have here? Nothing happened. But in truth, right after the election, there were people who were actually substantiating claims that some people had actually voted a couple of times, voted twice, or falsified some records and things like that. So there were some things, but not a lot, apparently.
Well, and if there is evidence that that's occurred, then our prosecutors or legal system should be handling that. I think what I read the other day was there are 23 cases around the country, and when you consider that tens of millions of ballots that were cast, 23 cases isn't exactly a large-scale fraud. But more importantly, I think in Utah we don't have evidence of it. And Spencer Cox, when he was lieutenant governor and then as governor, said the most common instance of fraud that we have in Utah is when parents of missionaries sign a ballot for their kid who's overseas and fill, and submit that. That's technically election fraud and shouldn't be done. And I think there's another thing important to note here that people keep saying, well, if you think the elections are so squeaky clean, why are you afraid of having an audit? Let's do one and find out. Well, we had an audit in 2019 done by the legislative auditor. It was limited in its scope, but it came back and said that there aren't any serious election problems. But again, they try to separate it from the 2020 election and from this the stuff that Donald Trump and his followers are sort of trying to build up. But you really just can't do that in the context of this in this audit. So look, we're going to go ahead and do it. The lieutenant governor said that she's happy to accommodate the legislative auditor general, and we'll see what comes out. Hopefully, when this is done, if the audit is complete and it comes back clean, then hopefully there's nothing further to be said about it, and we can move on.
All right, and this criminal whodunit, it may be the taxpayers who are the victims here. All right, Robert, thanks so much. And if you want to read more about Robert Gehrke's column, it's on saltlaketrib.com.
Kind of a fun read, too. Very creative here. Robert, thanks so much. Appreciate it.